All right. So we have with us today two exceptional brothers that I've had the pleasure of knowing for some time and spending part of my educational journey towards, as many of you know, working on a Master's of Divinity focus in Islamic chaplaincy. But that began some years ago, really at American Islamic College, where I met my the first brother I want to introduce, Chaplain, a very learned, sincere, and dedicated brother, Muhammad Tausif Akbar. Um, he earned an MA in Islamic Studies with a concentration in theology from American Islamic College. He'll complete his MDiv at the end of the fall 2021. And he became a resident minister at Georgetown University and then a chaplain intern at MedStar Georgetown Hospital. He now serves as the associate chaplain of Muslim and Interfaith Life at Carleton and St. Olaf Colleges in Minnesota. What I did mention, we also go back to Sound Vision days. Had some really good, great experiences while I was as the host of Radio Islam. He was working with the Burma Task Force. So he caused a lot of good trouble during that time. So alhamdulillah, I want to thank him for being here. Our next panelist is my brother. He often tries to say he's the other Tariq. I say he's the better. He's the more refined and just a beautiful brother. Brother Tariq, aka Al-Hajj Rashay Tariq Abdul Haq. He is a third-year graduate student at Bayan Islamic Graduate School and Chicago Theological Seminary, pursuing a Master of Divinity degree in Islamic chaplaincy. He's a recipient of Bayan's Muhammad Ali Spiritual Leadership Scholarship. Brother Tariq is a certified speaker with Islamic Speakers Bureau of Atlanta and is co-lead of the ISB Leadership Institute. He is a trustee of Masjid Al-Quran in Atlanta and has served in leadership positions in several masajid. Brother Tariq is married and a father of 6. His favorite inspirational quote, it's a good one, says, "Don't count the days, make the days count," from the late Muhammad Ali. May Allah have mercy on him, be pleased with him, grant in paradise. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum to both of you brothers.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yeah, so once again, I appreciate you all taking the time to come and to have this conversation. A lot of folks, they hear chaplaincy and they automatically think about a Christian, they think of the Christian faith. They're not aware that chaplaincy, as it continues to grow, that it has become a much more inclusive space that has rooms for all faiths and for no faith. So if we could begin just to kind of talk about the journeys that have led you into chaplaincy, and I'm going to ask my brother. I introduced you first. I'm going to ask you second. So I'm going to ask my brother, Brother Tariq, to take that one.
Alhamdulillah, inshallah. I was waiting here, Brother Tausif's story first. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullahi Kareem, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. First, thank you very much, Brother Tariq, beautiful brother. And I've just met so many beautiful people in my journey toward chaplaincy. Where to begin? As you said, a lot of people, including myself, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, my concept of a chaplain was, derived mostly from what I've seen of Catholic priests and Catholic priests serving as chaplains in hospitals. Because I came from the Tampa, Florida area, and there were a couple of Catholic hospitals or Catholic affiliated hospitals, of course, that serve people of all faiths, but the chaplains were mainly Catholic. And then later on, I saw chaplains of other denominations, but of course they were all Christian. So I did not have a concept of chaplaincy beyond that as well, except for about 15 years ago, we had Muslims going into prison chaplaincy. So I became familiar with that. But as you said, Imam Tariq, it has really evolved now. Chaplains really provide spiritual care. And the key term is spiritual, because it's not necessarily religious. The focus is on the indwelling spirit of all human beings, as all human beings have a spirit. So, especially in the hospitals, the chaplaincy role has evolved to, for example, although I'm a Muslim chaplain, I interact with patients of all different types of faiths, all different denominations of Christianity, Buddhism, Lutherans, you know, even Wiccans, as you said, they're atheists, etc. So it's fascinating because it opened up a lot of boundaries and horizons I didn't know existed. I had always felt a call toward doing this type of work, but not figured out a path of how to quite to get there. And in my youth, you know, I got married and, you know, taking care of a family and you're on that grind, you know, and but later, some friends of mine who were imams, such as you yourself, knowing of what some of my interests were, indicated to me, you need to check out the Bayon program in the chaplaincy program. I said, really? Seriously? Said, yes, there's a Master's of Divinity program in Islamic chaplaincy. And as I studied it, the more I studied, I said, wow, this is amazing. So eventually I applied and I got accepted, alhamdulillah. And it's been a marvelous journey since then.
Yes, 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 it is. Yes, it is. Brother Chaplain Tawseef, talk to us. You know, like I said, you and I, we're going back to 2012, 2013 at AIC. What led you into this very specific and unique profession? And, you know, what have you found thus far?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulullah. Jazakallah khair for this invitation, this opportunity, and the chance once again to get into some good trouble with the co-panelists, inshallah. Yeah, truly, it began not knowing what chaplaincy was in a similar way in an Islamic context. I had always heard chaplaincy in a Christian context. I had a colleague when I was doing my undergrad who was a really remarkable individual, Christian from the West Coast, and he was doing his undergrad over here at North Park University, which I was attending. And he had already had a lot of experience doing prison chaplaincy. And so I had some vague concept from watching, you know, Spike Lee's autobiography of Malcolm X, which, you know, that chaplain is not painted so well, you know, because he constantly raises those debates in the prison chaplain. But I had the opportunity to go with him a few times to see him in action. And I was like, wow. So that kind of, I think, was the original spark. And I always had an interest in studying comparative religion and interfaith work, but also, of course, like studying Islamic studies and Deen. And so I worked for a long time in the nonprofit sector, you know, care, you know, doing civil rights work, research work. And that's just has its benefits and its interests, but I constantly saw myself attracted to wanting to increase my studies and my proficiency and my competency in terms of being knowledgeable about Islam. And so through that experience with American Islamic College, I got to meet individuals such as yourself who are working, you know, grassroots with the community. And I also came across chaplains in an educational chaplaincy, you know, field, such as Omar Muzaffar, who's been a great inspiration, Abu Nur Abdul Malik Ryan. And I learned that this is a whole Jama'ah in itself, the chaplains, the Muslim chaplains of America. And so it became a good means to be able to manifest and practice my faith and vocation and as a calling. And it's a true blessing to be able to do so. So those are kind of some of the reasons of what sparked my interest and what got me interested in it, because along the way I also learned what chaplains do. You know, it's practical. They're actually applying, like brother Rashay, Imam Rashay, brother Tariq said that, you know, every person is a spirit and you're a spiritual caregiver. and so you inherently are valuing the dignity of a human being and constantly affirming that and walking with them in that journey, in difficult moments. And you hope and pray that Allah rewards you for that too, inshallah, along the way, and that you get your own kind of ilham or inspiration and openings along the way. And so I'm a newbie, I say, in the sense that I've really been a chaplain, I can say, only for 2 years, and as an education chaplain, I just began a full-time role this year at Carleton and St. Olaf colleges.
Mm.
Well,
Congratulations.
I do, give way to you, both of your wisdoms over mine. And so, Jazakallah khair.
Okay, brother. Like you said, this is its own Jamaat, right? And one of my favorite sayings is that the wisdom is in the room. So you may, you may know something, but collectively, we know more. So
That's beautifully said. Yeah.
yes, alhamdulillah. So when I think about the, actually being where you're a practitioner, you're putting into practice what you have learned, and then evaluating, right? And while I think both Brother Tariq and myself, we can both say that we've got prior experience. Well, while not necessarily under the umbrella or specifically chaplaincy, there's a unique difference in this field, right? I mean, but there are things that I've drawn on, as Imam, where I've had to counsel, as a servant of the community. But I found that there are very specific differences. There's a uniqueness to this that I have found. Can you both kind of address the that reality and kind of talk about how your education is supporting your practice and how that process of evaluation, what you know, whether previously outside or what you learned within your educational journey, and how you put that into practice now when you are providing spiritual care. All right, Tausif, I'm gonna call on you, Chat.
That's a real interesting question, because it's a question I get a lot now. What's the difference between an imam, for instance, and a chaplain, right? And in some ways, it's a tricky question, because we know in our tradition that imam has different layers and meanings, and imams are all different and at different levels. So, imam could just be someone who's the prayer leader in a masjid, and his function is just as a prayer leader. It may not be more than that. But it has also developed here, just because of the nature of American civic religion, which is predominantly Christian, as a kind of not a formalized clergy, but essentially that equivalent of what people think of when you say priest or reverend. And so there's an expectation, and it is the case that I've seen, that a lot of the masajid, they'll have a position for imam, and the imam will be the leader. He will be the leader of the congregation. He will be making, the rules in terms of what kind of study circles and books and things, and kind of developing community in the congregation. So for me, it's generally that sense is pretty distinct, but there's a lot of overlap as well. So you're providing spiritual care, you're providing emotional support. As a chaplain, you may be giving khutbahs just as an imam does. For instance, as an educational chaplain in the colleges, my job is to facilitate and lead Jumas. That's one of the responsibilities I have on campuses. So that's similar. But specifically to your question, I think about, what do we bring from our education to chaplaincy, that's really interesting. And I think it's this, at least in the MDiv track, it's this focus on the core competencies of, ministering, of providing pastoral care, of, really doing that field work, So that separates it from a MA. And so there's a more professionalized and standardized kind of curriculum. And it's really through that process education like CPE, when you do clinical pastoral education, which I think is absolutely essential for any chaplain, and which I don't think a lot of imams that I've encountered and had the pleasure to know have gone through that, for instance, but they may have had just like a jezba or a desire and because they're just good people, that they would go to the hospital and visit, but no formalized training in that regard. So that process education of give and take and really being thrown into a situation where, you don't have like a knowledge per se of where this person may be at a given moment, and you're there to provide presence at the very least, and to go deeper and to those places that are deep when necessary and if possible, so that you can talk about those things that they want to talk about, that are on their mind, that they're struggling with. I'm afraid of this test that's coming up. I'm afraid of, this, what's to come after this sickness. I have a bad relationship with family. So, how does that affect me spiritually?
Right.
So you really get deep on the one-on-one level, I think, in a lot of ways with chaplaincy, though there are times where you're going to be pulled by administration and institutions to do other things in programming. So it's a balance in the sea of rough waters.
Yes, sir. Imam Tariq.
Yeah, thank you, brother Chaplain Tulsi, for that, for opening up that book, because it helped me reflect. Also, it helped me reflect. As you said, the way that Imam has evolved here in the United States, I was taking notes as you said, there are multi-various paths and routes by which that happened. For example, I'm friends with an Imam who went through his formal training here, or secondary school, went through high school here, then was sent to overseas to study 7 years, the traditional religious sciences. He got the Arabiya, he got all, the traditional, then came back to the United States and then was made an assistant imam at a very big masjid that was run, in the suburbs. Suburban, of course, run by a board of directors. You have the imam, and the role of imam there is directed by the board of directors, carved out. But the imam really doesn't have that much autonomy in terms of leading, right? And so the young imam comes, he's enthusiastic, full of promise, so forth, but has not really been trained to deal with a lot of things he's going to encounter in that space, such as counseling, such as the social context of the youth in the schools, young adults, family issues. There are some imams that have that experience, and they were cultivated in that experience. And leadership is a feature that is common for imams. Typically, they're expected to lead. As you said, they lead the prayer, they may lead the congregation, they lead study groups, but they lead and they're looked to for direction. Whereas the chaplains, as opposed to the multivarious routes by which imams become imams, there is more of a code. There's a set of professional standards. There's a recognized curriculum in the divinity schools, which includes, as you said, ministry, pastoral care, counseling, and that clinical pastoral experience, usually in a hospital setting, which, as you said, is a whole different ballgame. It's completely different than what an imam or a pastor or a minister or a priest that has not been exposed to CPE, they would not have that experience. Yet that's part of the curriculum to develop a chaplain in a theological seminary. And then, so it opens up to professional standards, a code of conduct. There are organizations such as the Association of Professional Chaplains, the Association of Clinical Pastoral Educators, which is its own organization that do the CPE training. And in Muslims, we have the Association of Muslim Chaplains that has developed. So it's fascinating because this chaplaincy realm is developing. And what I like about it is that it does have a common set of professional standards that everybody adheres to, regardless. I would love to see us develop that among the imams, here in the United States, as moving forward. And I believe that brothers such as yourself, Imam Tausif and Imam Tariq in Chicago will be part of that. Imam Suleiman down in, there's just so many imams who are going through the MDiv program and the chaplaincy training that see the value in this moving forward to become more standardized in terms of professional standards, so that we can better serve our communities here in the urban areas and suburban in America, in the context here and now. Not discounting the traditional training that's necessary, it's needed. But what I've seen is that we need more of the chaplaincy type training and experience in order to better serve the collective needs of our communities. And working in colleague and in concert with imams such as Imam Tariq, to do the work. Also, the chaplains are in spaces sometimes that imams are not. You have a lot of Muslims now, especially youth, that aren't affiliated with any of the masajid. They call them what? Unmosqued. That's what the term was a couple of years ago. That they're in third space. They're in other spaces. Because they find reinforcement of their identities in those other spaces, even though they are Muslim. So chaplains are able to operate in some of these type of spaces as well.
I really appreciate both of you all giving your perspectives on that. One of the things that I would add to that that I've found in my journey that I've appreciated is the fact that chaplaincy is something that is not unlike, when you think about the imam, you're thinking masculine. Chaplaincy, there are so many women who have taken up chaplaincy as a vocation. And although this panel, small as it is, it does not represent their involvement, but it's one that is extremely important. I think it's played in particular, not just as students, but going through this program, having had the opportunity to learn from some really brilliant minds, Dr. Kamila Mutman being one, Chaplain Tahara Akmal, another, who've been instrumental in helping me to begin honing skills that I may not have been aware of that I needed to hone. And then also as chaplaincy, one of the things I really love about this, even though I think when we are serving in a imam capacity, I don't think I don't want to speak for everybody, but I don't think that I have necessarily been thinking about holding space for another human being. I think in terms of, I've approached that in terms of answering a question, maybe, at times, being an ear, but giving advice. Within the realm of chaplaincy, one of the first things that you become acutely aware of is that you don't necessarily have the answers. That it's not your responsibility to have an answer for the problem. You're there to recognize that individual's humanity. You're there to recognize the state that they may be in their development. To ask questions, allow them to uncover the answer, right? But a lot of times, we just had this conversation recently. The benefit of being present for another human being, and how that in itself is an element of providing spiritual care. Um, so let me ask both of you, what are your thoughts, about that dynamic where you look, we're elbow to elbow with men and women who have taken on this task of providing spiritual care, showing up, being there for people in all of these different spaces, whether it's in a hospital, prison, schools. What are your thoughts? What is impressed what is impressed upon you by this dynamic?
Well, I'd like to weigh in on that. The first thing, I should have made a disclaimer before I started, because I'm gonna get people in trouble, get myself in trouble. So the opinions that I state are those of myself only, and I'm not speaking for any other chaplains other than myself. In my individual experience, I have no authority, anything like that. So this is just me. So if you believe that, man, that brother Rashay, that brother Todd was kind of whack, alhamdulillah, that's your opinion. That might be legit. Okay, it might be legit. But two things to what you said, Imam Tariq, is like, number one, yes, for me personally, this thing has made me go into myself, because people had looked up to me as Imam this, and expect direction and guidance, and you feel an obligation to provide. But what the chaplaincy role has done is made me look within myself, because my role is not to give guidance or to give direction, as an Imam does, and you're far more qualified in doing that than I am. I can share my Islamic faith, my knowledge, etc. But making space, holding space for other people, when in the CPE, when I've dealt with someone who just lost.
Victorious Bill Vegas, week 6 edition of the Sunday Drive. 7 in progress. Both now have gone to the half.
Yeah, okay. Someone that has just died, they're Christian, that died, that the loved one is there, and I've got to be there with them in that space, in their grief. I can't say anything to them from the Quran or from the Hadiths or anything, because they cannot relate to that. So having to just stay in that grief and open up my heart to allow that grief and to sit in it with them, and to be humble in that space with them. And after time, have conversation and realize that it's not about me giving them anything. It's about me being there as a human being, ministering to their spirit, opening up mine and being vulnerable, and also feeling that grief, feeling the grief myself. It changed me and changed my perspective a lot, because I had read about ministry of presence, that the power of just being there and opening yourself up, that Palmer wrote about, I think, in 95, the theology of presence. But it actually was about being there in spirit and in solidarity with another human being, regardless of what their faith tradition was. Yeah, my strength comes from my Islam, but my humanity in being with them and in sharing in just the basic humanness of their grief and loss was powerful for them and for me, for everyone in that experience. And the other thing I wanted to say is that, yes, that there are many women now and Muslim sisters who are in the program becoming trained as chaplains that are very outstanding. Yes. They're dynamic. I also was, studied under Professor Camila Mutmin, and I'm looking at some of the work I did in her class right now, a spiritual genogram of my family that powerfully affected me and brought out tons of emotion I didn't even know was there. It took me months to process.
Can I pause? Can I pause for a second and ask you to just explain what that genogram is? Because the more I'm engaged in this study, the more I see that there's so much application for just people in general to better understand themselves. So if you could kind of just give us a brief overview of what the genogram is.
So the genogram is like a map. it's a map of one's family of origin throughout several generations. It's a map of relationships, and then a map of hold on one second, I'm gonna just grab this.
Yeah, so it's like the
Since you
oh wow.
part of the spiritual genogram that I developed. You see in the top row are great grandparents from the days of slavery. You know, my mothers and fathers. So I've got two sets of grandparents. You know, one of them is Bishop William David Chappelle, you know, who's also the great grandfather of David Chappelle, you know, Dave Chappelle, the comedian. He's a cousin of mine. I guess you would say a distant cousin. And Eliza Ayres. And then you go down to the next generation and you're mapping out what were their backgrounds and you know, when they were born, when they died, you know, what church or what religious affiliations they were they married? You can overlay also losses, like early deaths in the family. I found out that in every generation, there's at least one person that dies in their 40s. But the average age span is 80 to 83 normally for three generations, my three precedent generations. And then I look in my own, I have 6 children. I look in my own. I look at my siblings. I have a sibling that died at an early age, and the rest of them are on the normal, you know, trajectory. I also identified in there that we have an alcoholism issue that has run several generations. It wasn't until the genogram that it mapped out that I started to understand substance abuse, you know, going back to the days of slavery, is something that affects me and my genetics and my family. I also saw that that healing, and I didn't realize why I was drawn to chaplaincy, but there are healers in my family. You know, I never understood a chaplain to be a healer until I was in the CPE experience.
Let me ask you, let me ask, Brother Tausi, did you, have you also done the genogram exercise?
I have not done that specific way, but we, you know, were encouraged to do something similar. And I think it's something that actually not in the college, but Chaplain Omar Muzaffar at Loyola with his students.
Say his name again so we can just give him another shout out. Because
Omar Muzaffar.
Yeah, big shout out to.
Big shout out. But he does something which I think is is similar in a way. It's a relationship genealogy almost, but it's the 25 people closest to you. And it goes to this idea of what I think is the premise of what these exercises do is, you know, it involves working on yourself, like really, you know, going deep into yourself. And, you know, those things that may be in the subconscious, that may be in the shadow side, you know, which is a fancy term psychologists I learned use. You know, I just came across this term this past CPE that I did my unit. And it brings it out because whether we know it or not, and it seems so simple to say, but to me, it was a profound realization, is that our spirituality, our connection to Allah is deeply, deeply, profoundly affected, most of all in our relationships, especially those relationships closest to us. And so I think any chaplain would come to this realization, is that because before you minister to people, you have to kind of try to get right as much as possible with yourself, you know, which we know Iman goes up and down. But this idea that, you know, as individuals, as human beings, you know, if our relationship is off with our mom or dad or our spouse or our loved ones, that in some way is going to affect our relationship with God. Because so much of this deen is built upon sila, upon relationship, upon connection. And so I think that, and that is really profound And I was actually just reflecting on what you shared, and Jazakallah khair for sharing that. It also inspires me to want to do the same, because I haven't done that specific exercise.
You know, one of the things that continues to, I guess, astound me, and not surprise me, but astound me, is the importance and the really like the universal application, or potential for application, that for human beings in general, right? Not just if you're going to be if you're studying to become a chaplain, to serve as a chaplain, but you think about the value of that as an exercise. You know, we have the concept of mujahada, right, which is where you are constantly looking at your intention, looking at your niyyah, looking at why you're doing what you're doing with the intention of improving, right? And this all, you could say these are offshoots of taqwa, you know, God consciousness. But to have the tools, have physical tools that you can use that assist you, where you can look at where you come from, where you're going. These tools for examination or reflection, just universal application, but you don't find out about those things. Like, how powerful would that be for a middle schooler, you know, to sit up, okay, we want you to do a genogram. You know, I want you to go home, ask your parents, you know, about their parents and their parents, and you look at your relationships and the habits and all of these things. So a lot of what I've seen throughout my journey thus far has just shown me that there is a universal potential for the application of the principles that undergird a successful, you know, practice as a chaplain. So let me ask you both. We talked about CPE. You both have mentioned CPE. So CPE is clinical pastoral education. So that's when you got to go in. You go into the hospital. You serve as a chaplain under the supervision of a chaplain educator. Can you all give me maybe one or two experiences? I'm looking at the time. I do want to open it up, like maybe like 1:46 or 7, if you got any questions or comments. But anything that may have surprised you during your CPE when you've gone in, anything that has really impacted you and set with you, and why?
Imam Rashay,
well, before I went into the CPE, no, because I did it in the summer, so it was an intensive, like, so that's 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, 6 days a week. Plus, there are times that I'm on call. So if a code, you know, if a heart attack comes in or a stroke call comes in after hours, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, they need a chaplain, I get the call, I've got to go, you know, just like a doctor that's on call. Before I did the experience, I had put out, I wrote down 77 days. That's all I got to do, 77 days. And so as each day I would cross off and say, okay, 1 down, 76 to go, 2 down, 75 to go. So it was like something to just endure and get through. But 2 weeks into it, it was something I started looking forward to. It exhausted me. It pushed me to the limits. It stretched me, but I enjoyed it. And that was the biggest aha. I said, who in their right mind would like being in a hospital, you know, when people are coming in crisis mode? I'm not supposed to like doing that. But I found that I felt that I was of value there, and that I was able to connect with the people there and somehow help them through what they were going through. And I didn't understand that. But the Genogram, reflecting back on that, that's when I discovered that there were healers all along in every generation. I said, perhaps that's part of what is in me. And so that helped connect it for me. So that was the biggest aha moment. It was something I thought I would hate, but I ended up enjoying it and growing from it, and find myself wanting to do a residency now once I'm done with my MDiv.
Yeah, Mashallah, man, subhanAllah, I really find myself resonating with a lot of what Imam Tariq said. And yeah, I was meeting it with also a sense of dread and, anticipation at the same time. Mine as well was, my CPE experience was summer intensive, 10 weeks. I remember at the end of it, when we get our certificates, I said that, 10 weeks, that felt like 10 years, you know, um, and even analogized it to, we learned that Moses, it seemed like he aged 40 years on the mountain because he was coming in direct, um, communication with God. And there's something so sacred being in the hospital, and being with people who are in, one of two, and not only these two situations, but very vulnerable, very difficult, anxious states, which you could imagine, any type of sickness, to also, because I was on the transplant ward, the flip side of people who had received a second chance at life, who were so grateful, and so many of the ayat of Quran were just become apparent, like talking about how sometimes you only remember God when you're in that foxhole, or you're in that on that ship in a storm, then everybody remembers God, but you sometimes want to stay in that pit with the person to be like, well, what if, it wasn't this way, but you enjoy those moments with them, and you praise God and you pray. And so there's a very strong interfaith element as well, because Muslims tend, at least where I was working, were maybe 5% of the population of the patients. There were more staff, which I think would be true in a lot of hospitals. And so you're also interacting with staff and how they deal with their busy schedules, and like it gave me a new appreciation for the work of nurses and doctors and the administrative people. SubhanAllah, there's so much to say, so many experiences that I think we could talk about, maybe devote a whole hour to this, in fact, like it's such an important question. And one last thing I'll say and I'll mention is that wonderful teacher at AIC, Dr. Faryal Salem, who was one of the pioneers of Muslim chaplaincy. She started at Hartford, really amazing, a lot of wealth of knowledge, and like, situational fiqh, like how to apply fiqh with wisdom, because that, I think that goes to your other question of some imams. They might have that book knowledge and like they might have memorized a lot of knowledge, but like, how are you applying this knowledge? Are you harming people even more than healing them and bringing them closer to Allah, right? But she makes a point to say that for all her students who are on the chaplaincy track and who are doing their MDiv, make sure that your CPE experience is in the hospital, right? Because that is really where you're going to cut your teeth on a spiritual, emotional counseling level, where you're going to be, you're going to question yourself, and you're going to be questioned and given feedback by your cohort, the other individuals who are taking CPE with you, and going places where you thought you'd never go and didn't want to go, and might not be happy that you went there until later. Like Brother Rashay Tariq, you were saying that, it develops you in a certain way through these struggles, through this test of fire, you come out with like a stronger and tougher metal, and more experience. Like it's in there. And people go on who want to do hospital chaplaincy. I think you have to do like 3-4 units.
Yeah, 4 units.
So like,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you both. And a lot of what you all said, I certainly echo, and that resonates with me. So I'm not gonna belabor the moment and repeat. I want to take this moment now to open up and ask if there are any questions or comments or reflections that the audience has. Please feel free, raise your hand. If you want to come on camera, you can do so. But we definitely want to make space for any reflections. Okay. Dr. Taleem has her hand raised. Go right ahead.
Yes, alhamdulillah. Thank you all. So much great information. I'm kind of wondering, as a as a chaplain, I personally would not think that there would be Muslim chaplains if I didn't have that knowledge, right? So when someone is, in the hospital or in a space and they say chaplain, an imam or someone Muslim, it does not come to mind automatically, right? So what have your experience has been with kind of navigating a field that is predominantly Christian led and Christian understood, kind of inside of your Islamic identity?
I'll give a 30-second answer to that. One thing has been, it's not been difficult. It requires some, I think some subtlety, if you will, in terms of, because, you're there to provide care for whoever it is. Doesn't matter what their faith is or lack of faith. So what I found in doing so is to say, I introduce myself. I'm Chaplain Tariq, and I'm here with the Office for Mission and Spiritual Care. I'm here to check in on you, and we proceed. There are some times where there have been times where a person has asked me, about my faith. Are you Christian, or are you Muslim? But it's not as often as I probably would have thought. And I think maybe that's also a reflection of the space that I'm encountering these people in, because I'm doing my CPE in the hospital, and I find people who have been up to this point more often than not happy to have someone there, happy to have someone reaching out. So that's been my reflection. So it has not been that much of a challenge, aside from some of the language that identifies who the spiritual care provider is. We could certainly use a more inclusive term, because chaplaincy does, connote proximity. Well, it falls under the umbrella of Christianity. So I'm gonna open it up for you two brothers. If you have a reflection on that, because I know we got some other hands.
I was only going to say one thing. That's why we are at the hospital I'm at, the entire system, they use the language spiritual health clinician. Spiritual health clinician. And so it's called a spiritual care team. Now, everyone still refers to it as chaplains, but there's a deliberate change in the language to try and change that perception, right? And okay. It's conscious. So, but I've had experiences like you, it varies. To Dr. Elameen's question, it varies, but it does take a lot of patience and a lot of gentleness with the people to meet them at whatever level they're at.
Yeah.
I'll just add on, Jazakallah khair for that. In my experience when I was doing, at least in the CPE hospital, and this may vary to context, and as you noted, right, like the space you may be in. So we were an interfaith team, and I would just introduce myself as Chaplain Tosif. Sometimes I would say I'm an interfaith chaplain if I got a vibe like they were like, okay, questioning, this guy, it's a weird name. How do you say your name? And that became an opportunity to talk. And sometimes they were interested in talking about Islam, and they had questions about Islam. I even had non-Muslims sometimes ask for a Muslim chaplain specifically because they didn't want to talk to someone of their own faith. So that does happen sometimes in the hospital. One thing that I find interesting underlying the conversation, though, is what you noted, Imam Tariq, in that this term historically is a very Christian term, and it's infused by this history of the development of chaplaincy as a byproduct of Western Christendom, right, through history. And I think a lot of great work has been done by some earlier Muslim chaplains like Imam Sultan, Sundus, the late Imam Sultan, and then Sundus Khulaki, who has Musings of a Muslim Chaplain, which is a nice book. And she talks a little bit about this term chaplain, and she talks about how it actually comes from this word to mean to cover up.
Yeah.
And so it relates beautifully to this notion of like the prophet's mantle, and how like after the first revelation, when he ran to Khadijah, and we were just talking about this in our class at AIC, and someone made a beautiful comment saying that Khadijah radiallahu anha was the first Muslim chaplain. So the first Muslim chaplain was a female, which is so like how would you say, like fitting,
Yeah.
considering that this is a form of leadership that is open for Muslims to really excel in. But and he says, Zammaluni, Zammaluni, Zammalini, cover me, cover me, cover me. And so, and we have a long history of spiritual caregivers and people who have provided. So I think we do have the tools but some translation is involved sometimes.
Yeah.
In terms of getting to how do we see this, and what's maybe some of the nuances and differences that do, because there are some distinctions, and there's probably some things that we wouldn't be spiritually okay to do that a patient might request us or a student might ask us, and we'd have to navigate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not sure who was first, Sister Gloria, Dr. Gloria.
Yes, assalamu alaikum. Please pardon me, I'm traveling, so there's a little road noise, and I signed on a little late. But
Dr. Gloria. Okay, we will obviously.
sorry,
okay,
I got cut off a little bit. I want. Yes, sorry, I'm traveling.
No problem.
I wanted to know if any of you had any experience in prison chaplaincy. You may have covered that, but as I said, I'm traveling, so I'm signed on a little late.
Not in an official capacity. No, I've not done that yet.
I haven't done it in an official capacity. I've shadowed a chaplain in a prison before, a number of years ago, but I do know a number of Muslim prison chaplains as well, and it's a definite need.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, we have a number of classmates right now beyond that are prison chaplains, but I haven't done it officially.
Yeah. Okay.
We have one more question and about 2 more minutes left. So if I can pull Brother Bashir to the front and make sure that we're aware of the time we have.
Brother Bashir?
You're not.
I think I was muted. Am I unmuted now?
Yes, sir.
We can hear you, sir.
Okay, all right. Assalamu alaikum. And I'm hope you're not putting me before anyone because of my age.
No, you're
it's because of your beauty, brother. Your beauty.
Watch yourself. Watch yourself. But I want to ask the commentators in your studies and what you learned in the area that you're studying in the chaplaincy. We talk about societal ills, and have you transferred that knowledge and information to our everyday situations that we see out here in society? So I'd like your comments concerning
that. Let's all see if we can actually do a 30-second. Imam Tariq?
Absolutely. I mean, we're dealing with the youth that we're counseling. It's everyday real situations they're experiencing right here, right now. Bullying, identity issues, substance abuse issues, all kinds of things. And it is quite real because it's dealing with people who are in the here, in the now, and dealing with their problems right here and right now.
I would co-sign to that and just add, in the educational chaplaincy sphere, in just these 2 months, I'm seeing, what you would imagine a college-age Muslim student would be facing in terms of wanting to, you know, party and alcohol and drugs and dating. And this question of dating is a big one in relationships. How do I stay true to my deen? But at the same time, you know, I have these feelings and urges that are very natural. And so, you know, as far as the societal ills, you know, Instagram and social media and the influence that's having on the young minds is something that's recurring and common. But you name it, I feel in a lot of ways, chaplains are frontline responders, you know, that are called on to do some sort of spiritual triage in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I guess I would close by saying that the problems have not become, I don't think, more evident as a result of education. I think what has become more evident to me is my, on a personal note, because this chaplaincy forces you inward and force you to reconcile with your own sensitivities and shortcomings, your ego. It has pushed me to realize that my ability to have a positive impact in whatever space that I'm in, because I really felt this is universal application, is going to be directly tied to my ability to really improve myself, to make sure that I'm whole and I'm healthy, and that's an Islamic principle, right? The governance of the soul. Alhamdulillah, yeah. But so the education has turned me inward so that, inshallah, I can be a more effective chaplain, a more effective imam, more effective human being, husband, father, all of it.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, thumma alhamdulillah. I pray that Allah continues to bless you all in your education and your journey. Thank you for being there for so many people who need you, and thank you for spending time with us this afternoon on a Sunday. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.